This incident took place in Window Rock, Arizona. When I was 17, I was with family and we were in the area of Butterfly Butte, going through the mountains near Window Rock. It was late at night and all around us were nothing but trees. We were in a pickup truck. I was sitting in the front with my sister and her husband. My two brothers and cousin were sitting back in the bed. All of a sudden, this critter runs out in front of us and across the headlights. I think it's a deer. My brother-in-law, Eddie, said it was a coyote. It happened so fast, but just in case, we do say a prayer. Coyotes often bring bad luck. Well, we soon forget about it, driving along and talking, when up in front of us, we see, standing in the middle of the country road, are 4 more coyotes. Now, I've seen lots of coyotes out where we live, but it's rare when you see more than 2 at a time, and even less sitting in the road. Eddie slows down the truck, but they stay right there, almost as if daring him. Then, when it looks like he's gonna have to stop or hit them, they move off towards the shoulder and disappear into the trees. Eddie then makes a remark that something must be going on, and that he wants to get home as soon as possible, but my sister tells him better safe than sorry, and to not go too fast. Now, the only thing worse to us Navajos than coyotes appearing out of nowhere is the sound of an owl. When you hear them the way that we did, something's not right. It could mean that someone close to you is in danger. The fact is, they're always quiet, but we start hearing these owl hoots, one after the other, as if they're communicating. More creepy than anything, there were 6 of us in that truck, and I know I counted 6 hoots. The turnoff from the country road is a dirt road, and it is less than 10 minutes from our house. Eddie is driving along, going a bit faster than my sister is comfortable with. Looking back over my shoulder, I can see the rest of them there in the bed bouncing, and also sliding around a bit. Only a minute or 2 down the road, we can see the lights from the houses, still in the distance, but close enough that we're all feeling better about things. Suddenly, Eddie slams on the brakes and yanks the truck to the left. I swear I saw something big and black definitely up right in front of us. Despite Eddie's efforts, the truck runs right into it. We hit it so hard that it sounded like a gun going off. I was holding on tight to the door and seat, but I could hear the rest of my family being thrown around in the back. They were screaming and cursing. Eddie was able to get control of the vehicle pretty fast. When it stopped, I jumped out to make sure my 2 brothers and my cousin were good. They were only banged up a bit, which is more than I can say for the pickup. The whole front was total. The only thing still intact was one headlight, which was still on. As we're standing around the truck, we're all looking to the right of the road, where less than 6 feet away is this 6-foot-high chain link fence that runs along the shoulder in both directions, as far as the eye can see. The woods beyond the fence goes all the way back into the hills. The point is that there is no way that whatever we hit took off in that direction, or even came at us from that way. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that whatever it was came out of nowhere. At least it seemed like it. Almost like it just popped up from the surface of the road. Or maybe dropped down from the sky. In the meantime, Eddie was taking a closer look at the damage. It was, after all, his own truck. He noted that there was some skin, hair, and also blood on what remained of the grill, along the lip of the hood, and even by the light fixture that was broken. Convinced that whatever it was hurt and most likely crumble up nearby. We looked around up and down the road, and off the shoulder to the left, but we found nothing. It was really dark, and it just felt very eerie. We then decided that we would come back when the sun was up and look around. We all piled back in the truck. Eddie couldn't get it to start. He turned the key in the ignition and couldn't get a sound, almost like there was no battery. The funny thing is that one headlight was still on. Go figure. The type of shit that happens out here on the REZ, huh? No sooner had Eddie finished cursing and punching the steering wheel, we hear off into the darkness, and in the trees to the left, some whistling and laughing. almost like someone is playing games with us. 1 second it seems to be coming from over there. The other second it seems to be coming from over here. And then after that from back a ways. It went on like this for like 10 minutes. My sister then tells us it's a skinwalker, and she begins to say some Navajo prayers. By this time only my sister is still in the truck. Eddie and I are standing by the bed on the driver's side, and my 2 brothers and cousin are in the bed. My older brother, Nicky, he's not scared. He just says it's some idiot in the woods, and he volunteers to run to the house and come back with my father's car. The house is less than a mile away. No sooner does he start jogging off, we start to hear the laughing and whistling going with him, almost like he's being followed. He did tell us later that he was aware of it, and even though he thought he heard his name being whispered, he just kept ignoring it and just continued jogging. About 10 minutes later, we see these headlights coming towards us. It was Nicky. When we all got back to the house, Eddie called the sheriff to report the accident. It was really late, but he told Eddie that he was going to meet him there and have a look just in case somebody did get hit. I went back with Eddie in my dad's car. The sheriff showed up only a few minutes later. He had one of those industrial-sized flashlights, but as much as he looked around, he couldn't find anything. He agreed by the look of the hair left behind that whatever we hit, it was not a deer. When we told him about the whistling and laughing, his whole demeanor just changed. It was obvious that he was no longer interested in standing out there in the dark. He went back to his car and wrote out one of those little accident reports, and he gave it to Eddie. The next day, my mother had a friend of hers come to the Hogan. She was this really old woman. We were actually scared of her when we were kids. She had this small crystal-like thing, sort of yellow in color. She would hold it up and look through it, almost like she could see into the past, or future, or something. And what she told my mom is something that has stuck with me since that day. She told her that there was a battle of wills between a local medicine man and a skinwalker last night, and that if it wasn't for the medicine man distracting the skinwalker, all 6 of us would have died when the truck went out of control and hit the trees. She never did tell us who that medicine man was, nor the skinwalker, even though she said that she knew them both. And interesting enough, when Eddie went back for the truck the next morning, it started right up with no issues. Now keep in mind that a skinwalker is also a medicine man, except they gone evil and practice bad medicine. Please be careful when you're driving on the REZ at night. I grew up in the South. A bunch of beautiful places to see that haven't been taken over by concrete yet. It's nice, but along with that, it's pretty boring. Being a teenager and wanting to go out and have fun, it's led to mostly improvising with your buddies and hoping something good will come out of the night. There wasn't really a local spot to go hang out, like a club or a cool bar, and the places that were close to this was boring, because you had already done them so many times. Something that I found a ton of enjoyment as a teen was just cruising around super late at night, listening to music. I would fill my gas tank up, grab something to drink, a cigarillo, and I would just take off driving around until the sun came up. It was a way for me to just clear my mind and relax. Those country back roads were always fun to drive down at 2 a.m. and was also just the right amount of spooky. I can't exactly remember what month it was, but I know for a fact it was the summertime. I was just out of school, and I also remember it being a comfortable chill night, so if I was to guess, it must have been around July or August. I was cruising around like I always did, and I was completely worry-free. I had music blasting and I was in my zone. I decided to head down to a park, just because I was bored. This park is at the very end of a long stretch of a country road, but it's also a really pretty drive. When I say country road, I don't mean that it's some dirt road that goes through the woods or anything crazy like that. It's a normal paved road, but there is really nothing on it after a certain point. The entire road takes about 20 minutes to drive down to get to the park, and after about 10 minutes into the drive, the houses start to get spread out further and further, and eventually there's no houses and just road leading into the park. I think a lot of the reason I like this drive at night is because of how creepy it was, and I looked at it as some sort of adventure or whatever. The park isn't open for camping or anything. It's mostly just a lot of land with walking trails and biking trails set up through miles of woods. So obviously at around 3 a.m. in the morning, it's pretty dead. I made it there, and I just did a slow normal little loop around drive of the park. Now, the night before it had stormed pretty bad. So bad that I remember my parents and I had to take shelter because of the threat of a tornado touchdown. There ended up being no tornado, but the storms were pretty damn rough. Because of this, I came up on a fallen tree in the road that looped around to the exit of the park. This must have happened due to the storm. It wasn't some massive tree or anything, but I know for a fact that there was no way I could have gone over it with my car. It was pitch black everywhere, besides the front of my car, because of my headlights, and because of that, I ruled out backing up the entire way I just drove when I entered the park. I knew that was super dangerous, and there was no way. At this spot on the road, there was flat land on each side of me. I figured that it would make the most sense to just back up in the grass beside me, just a little, and then drive back the way I came. It was a one-way loop around the park, but I wasn't really worried about going out the wrong way since it was so late. So I started to back up off the road so I could get my car turned around. All was good until I went to pull back up on the road. I didn't take into account how wet the grass was and the amount of mud. My car went nowhere. My back tires were completely stuck and were spinning in places. I was trying to floor the gas pedal. I started to become pretty scared at this point. Not the most ideal situation to be in. I immediately take my cell phone out of my pocket and saw that I had service. A super huge feeling of relief. I called my parents and told them what happened and where I was. They were pretty pissed at me, but said that they were going to pay for a tow truck to come get me out. Both of my parents drove small 4-door sedans, and they would have been zero help in the situation. I was about 45 minutes away from my house and the rest of most human civilization, so I realized that I would be stuck out there for at least an hour before someone was able to come get me. It was a freaky feeling, but I was trying to clear my head and just continue to listen to music and be on my phone in the car while I was just waiting. Not really much more I could do. After I kind of calmed down from the initial anger that I had, I started to check out my surroundings. Didn't even notice at first because of everything going on, but in front of my car's placement was a field that was full of the most amount of deer that I think I ever seen at once. There must have been about 40 of them, just walking around and eating the grass. The field wasn't directly in front of my car, but if I was to get out and throw a rock, I would have easily been able to hit one of them. So if I was to guess, they were about 30 yards out. This didn't really help with the creepy level going on. Looking out in front of your car and seeing about 80 eye reflections staring back at you. It's just a bit of an alarming feeling overall, but I was relieved it was just a field of deer. I watched them for a little bit, but I was quickly over it and just started to browse through my social media. They seemed to have been over it quicker than I was, because they all went back to walking around and eating once they figured out that I wasn't going to attack them or anything. After browsing my phone for about 15 minutes, I finally get a call back from my parents letting me know that a tow truck guy is on the way and about an hour and a half out from my location. Still to this day, I remember hearing that and having the thought of, you gotta be fucking kidding me. I understood that me, and only me, was the reason I was in the situation I was in, so I really couldn't be mad at anyone else. But that was very obviously not what I wanted to hear. I decided that the smartest thing for me to do was just make sure my doors were locked lay back in my seat, and take a nap to pass time quick. So that's what I did. So I'll wake up about 45 minutes later to the feeling of being watched. I'm not sure if anyone has ever experienced that feeling before, because I don't know how common it is. But there was a sixth sense alarm going off in my head, telling me that I needed to wake up. Waking up to that feeling in the situation I was in, and the surrounding that I was in, was most likely the worst case scenario. I sit up and immediately check my surroundings, and see nothing. I looked through my car very quickly for any sort of weapon, and I found a pocket knife. A fucking pocket knife. I was very scared, even though I saw and heard absolutely nothing. That feeling is terrifying. I was shocked to see that the field of deer in front of me was still full of deer. I don't know anything about animals, but I guess I always just assumed they don't hang out in the same place for long. Not sure why I thought that, but I was surprised to see them. I called my parents back to see if they heard any kind of update from the tow truck dude. I decided not to mention the feeling I was having because I didn't want them to worry more, and I also knew it was nothing more than a feeling, and also nothing to back up why I was feeling that way, other than just being spooked out in general. No update from the tow truck guy, so we all assumed everything was still the same on his end. The call lasted just a few minutes because I felt like such a dick. They both had to wake up for work in a few hours, and now have to spend some money. And on top of all that, I'm sure they were worried about me. I could tell they were annoyed at the situation, but also worried. I told them that I was going to tell them when the guy arrives, and that I'm sorry. We hung up, and I looked up from the phone, and immediately went from 0 to 100 in panic mode. The deer in front of me were all completely perked up, staring in the same direction, to the right of them. Let me remind you that there's about 40 deer in this field. Every single one of them standing completely still, looking at something. I put my high beams on and stared, waiting for absolutely anything to happen. Nothing. I tapped the horn real quick. They didn't even budge or look my way. They were all still completely glued to what was by them. The way the tree line was, I couldn't see that far over the field. I know they were looking into the woods by them, but where I was at, I was only able to see them. I could hear my heartbeat. I grabbed that stupid pocket knife and just waited for something to happen. I would say it was about a minute after I honked that every single one of them, in unison, started to run the opposite way. They were running at full speed, and within 20 seconds, the field was completely empty. I was petrified in fear. I knew that staying in my car is what would be the safest thing to do, but it's the worst feeling when you feel like a sitting duck. My head was on a swivel. I was freaking out in every way possible. I assumed there was a bear or something, but it could be anything. I was convinced at this point that it was the devil himself. Didn't know what to do. I knew that the tow truck was close by, but I had no idea where he was. I began to shake because of my nerves, and just looked around to make sure nothing was by me, and focusing on the field in front of me. I did this for what felt like an actual eternity, sitting in complete silence and darkness in the middle of nowhere, waiting for something to jump out and attack you. 15 of the longest minutes of my life go by, and I start to see some lights break through the tree line on the road. As it gets closer, I see it's the tow truck guy. The lights on his truck felt like it was Jesus coming from heaven to rescue me. He gets up to me, and I jump out of my car and immediately ask him if he has a gun on him. I told him very quickly what just happened to me, and that something is definitely out here, nearby. He let me know that he had a shotgun in the truck, and assured me that it was most likely a bear or a bobcat. He did give me the whole "they are more scared of you than you are of them" bullshit. The tree was small enough for him to sort of bulldoze it out of the way with his truck, and then he attached my car to his and pulled me out of the spot I was stuck in. The whole time he was doing his thing, I still had my eyes glued out in that field waiting for something. He was completely done with everything in about 15 minutes, and he told me to follow his truck out of there onto the main road again. I got in my car and was ready more than anything to get the fuck out of this park. We started to drive away from the spot that I was in, and I still had my head on a swivel, completely shaken up. As we were driving away, I looked in my rear view mirror. We were down the park road, just a tiny bit, but I could still see the spot that I was stuck in lit up from the vehicle's lights and the moon. That's when I saw in my mirror a man come out of the tree line behind where my car was and walk into the middle of the road and just watched us drive away. My heart stopped beating, literally. I lost my breath and my eyes started to get full of tears because of how scared I was in this moment. I couldn't see any sort of details like what he looked like or even what he was wearing. To be honest, I don't really care. The feeling that I felt driving away from that spot, knowing that he was right there the whole fucking time just watching me as I was freaking out looking around, watching me as I was completely alone for a long time, maybe even coming right up to my window and watched me as I slept. That's a feeling that I can't even explain in words. All these years later, it still messes with me quite a bit. The entire time we were driving off, as long as I could see him, he didn't move. He just watched us in the road. A million things went through my mind. I was scared that there might be a few people up the road waiting for us. I was trying to figure out if I should start beating on my horn like crazy to get the tow truck guy to stop or not. I decided that all I wanted to do was get out of there, more than anything. The second that we finally got out of the park and was able to be on a 2-lane road again, I flew past the tow truck driver and I did nothing below 70 the entire way home. I flew through stop signs and stoplights. I didn't care. The only thing on my mind was making it home. I got home, ran inside, very quickly acknowledged my parents and said sorry and thank you, and went to my room. I didn't get a single second of sleep the rest of the night. I was searching for any sort of records of things happening in that area. Escaped convicts, similar stories, anything. And so I came to the conclusion that the man was maybe homeless. I read many things online, how it's common for homeless people to build some sort of shelter in the woods, which does make sense to me as to why they would do that. But obviously the unknown is the scariest part of it all. What if he wasn't homeless? What if he was gonna hurt me? There's so many possibilities of what could have happened, but the outcome that did happen is what I am most grateful for. I never did tell my parents this story until many years after it happened, and I was already older and moved out. It freaked them the fuck out too when I told them. I never went back to that park, ever. Even though I no longer live by there, I still have no desire to ever go back there. I don't think I could, even in broad daylight with a ton of people around. I also decided to stop doing those late night cruises. I did a few after that time with people, but even then, I felt very uncomfortable. I grew up in Winslow. I heard all the stories about the rules and skinwalkers and a few other things that you might haven't even heard about. But every now and then, I notice something consistent in stories that people tell me, and what really made it click is that they sound similar to something that my grandma told me as well. They're all different encounters, all from different people, yet they share a common, what should I call it, a theme, element, or similar experience. So I'll start off with what my grandma told me first, and then I'll tell you the other two that sound alike, but they're from different people, which makes me wonder if anyone else has had a similar experience and maybe know who or what this was. So my grandma, by the way, this didn't happen in Winslow. She grew up in Whitecomb, and eventually they moved to Winslow. She said that my grandfather, he used to drink a lot. She said one day she woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of people talking in the living room. She said she thought to herself, this son of a bitch brought people home to drink with, knowing real well that the kids got school. So she said that she gets up to go to the living room to tell everybody to leave. And when she got there, no one was there, just my grandpa talking. She never heard the door open, and she looked around, but there was no one else. Nobody who ran off or nobody trying to hide. So she tells them to be quiet because the kids are asleep and they got school in the morning. She goes back to her room and the voices come again. This time when she runs back, she says that Grandpa is passed out on the sofa and that it's really cold. At this point she's confused and she assumed that maybe she had started dreaming or was hearing voices. As she's about to walk back to the room, that's when she heard a voice again. She didn't tell me exactly what she heard, but it caused her to start praying, and then she said the coldness started to go away. When I asked her what happened or what it was, she simply said it was the devil. This next story I will tell in first person from how it was told to me. My grandfather in the early 70s, he was drinking with a group of friends. They were behind the house making a bonfire as they started to get drunk. As they were getting louder, having fun, they started to take pictures, making it a night to remember. He said it was a group of about 20 of them. Of course, he didn't exactly know everyone, but he knew majority of the people there. He said they were all having a good time. In the next few weeks or so, he ended up asking the friend that was taking the pictures if he had gotten them developed so that he could see them. When the pictures finally arrived, they were going through them, and they came across a picture where he was with his friend, but they were holding someone in the middle. Well, like if they took a group picture, all three of them, except no one was standing there, even though they had one arm around that person. He said that they burned the pictures right away. When I asked my grandfather about that story again, he just says that it was the devil that they met that night. This happened to my mom when her auntie, my stepdad, and the uncles were partying in some rental home. They noticed that there was an extra person in the room drinking with them, because my uncle told them to pass the bottle. They said that the guy has it, and they said they knew it was just them and no strangers. And so they said that the person was a spirit, and right away they all got up and left out of that house. My uncle, who was renting the place, refused to go back. So do you see how in each of these stories there was a stranger who showed up during a gathering and then disappeared, and no one ever remembers inviting them? Some people say it's the infamous shadow person. Some say it can be a trickster spirit, maybe even a skinwalker, which I highly doubt it. I swear nowadays anything paranormal happens on the REZ, and everyone blames it on a skinwalker. I don't think it helps that our stories have made them ways outside of our culture, and like everything else, people have twisted and turned it into something cool to talk about. When I asked my own parents a while back if growing up something like this ever happened to them, my mom just said, "That's why you don't drink or be out at night. You're basically calling on the enemy." When we lived in Gallup, we lived in Sunshine Canyon in one of the houses behind Harold Runnels on Wilson Avenue. Our friends there mentioned that there was paranormal activity in some of the houses, and apparently skinwalkers would walk by the arroyo behind some of the houses. If you're familiar with this area, you'll know how scary it can get out there at night. So one night, I was laying with my son who was 4 years old. We were on the couch in the living room. I woke up early the next morning, and I swear, I couldn't find my son. I looked in the kitchen, the kids' room, the playroom, my bedroom, and he was nowhere. I started walking down the hallway back to the living room, and that's when I started to hear some chanting coming out of the closet in the hall. The voice sounded like the little kid's voice from the movie The Shining. You know, when he talks to his mom in that scary voice. The chanting started out slow, and then it started getting fast. At this point, I'm freaking out. I was gonna open the closet door, but my fear got the best of me, and so instead, I made my way back to the living room, and to my surprise, there, on the couch was my son. I was really confused on how he was there, when he wasn't there when I woke up. Anyways, this was the first sign of many. Another time, my kids, my son, and now at this point his 2-year-old sister, they came to my bedroom and wanted to sleep with me. My son said that they saw a little blonde girl and that she was bothering them and wanted them to play with her. He also said that there was an old Navajo woman in the room with them. When I went to go check, there was nobody. For the next few weeks, he would always say that the little girl and the old woman would come visit them. So we ended up letting them sleep with us, or I would sometimes go sleep with them, and I would leave the hallway light on. Another night, I happened to fall asleep in the living room, and I woke up, and I saw this old native person looking into the window. He had long hair, and he looked like he didn't have a shirt on. I kept looking at him, and then he just disappeared. I ended up talking to one of my neighbors about the strange things that had been happening, and she also said that she had a relative spend the night at her place, and that apparently a man attacked her relative, trying to strangle her. Her relative tried fighting the man off, and she started yelling, and that he disappeared when my friend ran into the room and turned the lights on. We did end up moving from that place because it was scary as fuck. I heard it was the old ceremonial grounds, and there was a battle there a long time ago. Also, my ex-husband used to go to the bar, and whenever he would walk back, he would take the path on the arroyo, and he would claim that he would see a skinwalker on the other side of the arroyo, walking towards town. I am Navajo, and this isn't just your typical skinwalker story of something running along with me. It's about how your own family out here can be against you. My grandpa said that one night, he and his family were sleeping in the hogan, and they were suddenly awakened to a strange noise on top of the roof. They heard footsteps. It sounded like something was walking around. He said he heard it jump on and off the roof a few times. Grandpa said that he started looking up at the ceiling through the opening of the roof. As he was looking, he said he saw some long fingers grip the opening as something was pulling itself up, and he slowly saw eyes watching them from the opening. This thing was watching him and his family sleep. So he said he slowly reached over and grabbed his shotgun and went outside. He started yelling and started shooting. He said he heard a horrible cry as he hit it. He said it jumped off after looking at him and then ran away, leaving a trail of blood behind it. The next morning, Grandpa packed himself a sandwich, and he grabbed a handful of ash and went and followed the trail of blood. He said it led him to a mesa with a cave. As he was walking up to the cave, he started hearing singing, and he saw a fire. He loaded his gun and decided to walk into the cave. He said the person that he saw was his own brother. He was singing by the fire, trying to cure his wounds. He then said to his brother that he's not scared, nor is he afraid of him, and then he started throwing some of the ash that he brought towards his brother. He then walked back home. The next day, his brother died. I swear, our grandparents were some of the toughest people when it came to these things or whatever they are. I remember when I was maybe like 5 or 6 years old. We went to go visit my uncle's family in Zuni, New Mexico. They had certain rooms in that house that they told us kids to stay out of. They also had cochinas in the living room, on their mantle. At night, my uncle would put them away in one of the rooms we were told to stay out of. On one of those nights I got up to use the bathroom. Just before I was gonna flush the toilet, I heard what sounded like footsteps of little people. It was like the sound of little bells and the clacking of little sticks together. Then I heard the low tone of about 3 or 4 men, kinda like how it sounds when you see them at the dances. The muffled sound that only comes from behind someone wearing a mask. It didn't make sense to me. I was terrified. I just stood there crying. Then I started to scream out for my mom. Her and my auntie came. I told them what happened. They believed me. My uncle went into the room and left with a bag. He didn't come back until the following afternoon. To this day, I believe it was those little Kachina dolls. There was a crazy guy back in my hometown named Roy. A little background on how Roy went kinda crazy, and then I'll tell you about a supposedly haunted murder weapon. Yeah, just bear with me. This is gonna be followed by the time that I saw something weird on his property as well. The story sounds kinda crazy, but it's all true. Pretend that you're back in my hometown, an unnamed place. So we got this guy, his name is Lane. The dude is basically a menace, kind of like a local celebrity, but for all the wrong reasons. We also have these 2 brothers who are very well liked, Roy and his brother. One day, Lane invites Roy's brother on a hunting trip. Roy's brother is super easygoing, and despite knowing Lane isn't exactly friendly, decides to take him up on the offer. The 2 boys go up into the mountains, but only one of them comes back. The death of Roy's brother is ruled a hunting accident, and there's not enough evidence to say otherwise. But knowing Lane, everyone is suspicious. He becomes a true outcast and spends the rest of his days living alone on the outskirts of town. He is able to sell one of his guns, and it changes hands a few times. People said that this gun is the rifle he used to kill Roy's brother with, and for this reason, it's said to be haunted. For anyone interested, the rifle was a Winchester. To be more exact, it was a Winchester model 1892, 20 inches, or maybe the next size up. I can't remember exactly. Minimal checkering on the handguard and butt. The gun could have been basically a museum piece. It was a beautiful gun. Anyways, one of my buddies ends up with this rifle. He's kind of an out-of-towner and picked it up by chance, not knowing the history behind it. He keeps it locked up in a safe. When he first shows it to me, he tells me he thinks the thing is bad luck. He claims he's had some weird experiences ever since he bought it. Strange accidents, and some serious, like a severe windstorm causing major damage to his home. Just misfortune after misfortune. I only experienced something minor with this gun. It was the first time that my friend showed it to me, and at that moment, the TV was on in the background. The moment that I took the gun in my hands, the TV turned to static. My buddy and I looked at the TV. There was a long moment of static. I quickly handed the gun back, and the TV went back to normal. Like I said, kind of a minor thing, but it was still creepy. What I didn't tell my buddy at the time was how I felt when I held this gun. For reference, I have tons of war trophies in my collection, some with pretty grisly histories. I have fired a bunch of guns in my life, but I have never felt what I did when I held that Winchester. It was impossible to describe, except to say it gave me an ominous feeling, like a darkness hanging over me when I was holding it. After that, I couldn't help but wonder what exactly went down in those woods with Lane and Roy's brother. As much as I love classic rifles, I'm glad that one of them stayed back in my hometown. Well, 1,400 miles away from where I live. I forgot to mention that Roy himself, well, his mental health went down. It was after his brother died. I'm not sure if it's related, but Roy was later diagnosed with schizophrenia. It was pretty sad. Every few months, he would go off his meds and do some crazy stuff. For example, one time, I found him attacking an asphalt road with an axe. He was screaming about zippers. Apparently, he believed there were underground tunnels all through town, leading directly to his little shack. He would say that zippers, at least that's what he called them, which was basically a thief, would use these tunnels to sneak into his place, steal his stuff, and disappear before he noticed. He also sometimes claimed to be a reincarnated soldier from the Union Army, named Robert G. Steen. He would even spell it out, Steen. So yeah, it was pretty bad. Roy went from being the most well-liked guy in town to being banned from just about every public space. He and that evil guy Lane became our town's outcast. Anyways, my family and Roy's family had always been super close. After Roy went schizo, my parents had me check up on him from time to time. I would deliver water to his shack and also see how he was doing. I actually didn't mind doing this, even when he was off his meds. He was always very friendly with me, no matter what state he was in. He seemed to remember me and said I was a good person. However, he would still do some weird stuff. One time, I was at his place, and he offered to show me the room, where he said that he spoke with the devil every night. I declined. Back to my sighting, I was delivering water as usual, and this time, I had one of my friends with me. When we got to Roy's place, we found that he had ripped up all the floorboards in his shack to expose the underground tunnels used by the thieves, or zippers. He had tossed all the wood outside and set it ablaze in a bonfire. Being off his meds made Roy a serious talker, so my friend and I stayed for a little bit. It was getting towards the evening, and Roy was starting to ramble about some weird stuff, about something in the woods. The flames of the bonfire were still going on. That's when he looked at us and began to ramble about the strange and terrifying things that he has seen. He would say, "Did you know the trees have eyes?" His voice low. "They see everything that happens in these woods. Sometimes, late at night, I hear them whispering. They tell me things, secrets about the people in town. Dark, terrible things." Roy's eyes then started looking around as if he expected the trees to start speaking at any moment. He continued, his voice growing a little bit stronger. "And the tunnels, they aren't just for the zippers. No, there's something else down there. I hear it scratching at the walls at night, trying to get out." My friend and I looked at each other, but Roy was lost in his own world. That's when he started talking about the night that he met the devil. "He comes to me in my dreams," Roy said. "He stands by the tree sometimes over there. Other times he sits down over here and whispers stuff to me. He tells me that my brother's death was just the beginning. But sometimes I see shadows moving in my shack, even when the fire is out. They creep up on me, trying to drag me into the darkness. I know they have been sent by Lane, trying to finish what he started." The woods around us grew darker, and yeah, we should have gotten up by now. There was a moment of silence. Roy's head then snapped up, and he looked directly at me. "Do you believe in curses?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because this place, my life, it's all cursed. And it all started with that thing, with that rifle." The mention of the rifle sent a shiver down my spine. The scary events surrounding it, combined with what happened with Roy, just made everything terrifying. My friend and I decided it was time to leave, but just as we were about to say our goodbyes, I spotted something in the trees behind Roy. It looked skinny and tall. It looked to be covered in shaggy black hair. It stood there for a moment before turning away into the woods. After it disappeared, I was staring into the trees when my buddy tugged at my sleeve and asked, "Did you see that too?" That moment gave me goosebumps. Believe me, the two of us had a long, silent, and very intense car ride home that night. We didn't even talk about what we had seen until we were back inside the house, feeling safe. After talking about it, I gathered that my friend only saw the thing after it had moved, but I got a better look at it. We talked about what it could have been, but we couldn't think of any explanation that fit. Eventually, we just dropped it. These days, that patch of woods is abandoned. Roy's shack was demolished a while back, and the road leading up to it is blocked by fallen trees and old abandoned cars. It almost looks like the road was blocked by junk, maybe to keep people away. Who knows? I never did hear about Roy again until recently. He passed away. The rumor, or the story, is that he committed suicide. As far as that thing that we saw, we never saw it again. I guess just be mindful of stuff that you buy, or if it's given to you. You never know what's the history behind it. Be safe. I don't have a Skinwalker story today, but I have something that's even worse than that. I want to start off by saying that I am Navajo, and I've been living in the Navajo Nation my whole life. And of course with that comes with growing up as a kid. It was getting close to the end of summer, and we were all hanging out. This was back then when I was a teenager. It was starting to get dark. You get a group of young boys together, and of course they're going to do something that's not good. Well, we dared each other to go into an old hogan where a person had died. The hogan actually stood at the edge of town, kind of isolated from everybody. Now, why did we dare each other? Well, it was a place where the elders had warned us about, claiming that's where a chinde was. If you don't know what that is, it's the bad energy left from the last breath of the person who passed away. They said something about this being a ghost that contains all the sins of a person's life, and if the person died indoors, it can cause ghost sickness. Of course, we told each other this before we actually did it. But again, young teenagers, boys, daring each other, we made our way to the hogan. We opened the door, revealing nothing but darkness. There wasn't no ghost inside there. I'm not sure what we were expecting to see. Maybe a dead body. But it did feel a little weird. The air felt thick, almost suffocating like. We stayed only minutes, but later on we would find out that this was enough to bring something. My friend Jacob was the first one to get sick. What started off as a simple fever turned into a sickness that was starting to last a few weeks, with complaints that he felt like he was being choked. The doctors were baffled, and his parents were desperate. Meanwhile, that's when my nightmares started, vivid and horrifying. All nightmares about the hogan, and seeing what looked like a creature inside the hogan, but the dreams felt real. I was planning on telling my parents about this, and I guess be grounded for about 6 months or so. But before I did, somebody knocked at our home. The parents of Jacob stood at the door. Their faces were full of fear. They had a quiet conversation with my parents outside. After about 30 minutes or so, my parents came inside. They called me to the kitchen and questioned about everything that we did. They explained the seriousness of our actions and what we had done, the danger that we had invited by entering the hogan. The chinde wasn't just a ghost. It was the evil itself of a person, a spirit that we didn't see that was lingering around the hogan. Even mentioning the name of a dead person can bring a chinde to you, which is why you should never speak of the dead. Anyways, my parents ended up calling a medicine man. The ceremony was arranged pretty quickly. He performed a cleansing rite with sacred herbs, filling our home with smoke and the scent of juniper. As the ceremony finished, everything did feel different. Jacob also had a ceremony done. The nightmares that I was having went away, and Jacob ended up getting better. There was another friend that was with us, and I'm not sure what happened with him. Him and his family ended up moving out the REZ when summer was over. so we never found out what happened with them. Yeah, we learned the lesson alright. And on top of this, we were told to never speak of that night again. And so with that, I'll leave you with this warning. Beware of the places where somebody has died, for within its walls lingers a chinde, an evil spirit born from the final breath of that person. If you enter the place, nightmares and darkness will haunt you. Some doors are best left closed, and some spirits should just be left undisturbed. Say a prayer after listening to this story. Three summers ago, during a boar hunting trip down in the Ozark South, I ran into something that I just can't explain. I just got back from college, and I really wanted to get out in the woods, and I was really bored on a Friday night. So I chose to head out super early the next morning for a boar hunting trip with one of my best friends. We'll call him JD. Now, I've been hunting in deep south swamps all the way up to Alaska, and JD is an Eagle Scout, so he's not really prone to being scared so easily. We pack our stuff up and we leave this place around 12:30 a.m. After stopping for the breakfast of champions of beef jerky and also some energy drinks, we arrived at the area around 2 in the morning. Now this area that we're hunting in is very nice. We hunted it before many times in the daylight. We seen tons of deers and squirrels and even a baby fawn. We pulled in off the gravel track about 40 miles from town and 3 miles from this gas station, which doubles as a deer check station. We had a mountain lion walking our tracks on a previous trip at one point, so we rolled the windows and tried to take a short nap before the morning. Right away, we were hit by this nasty, sickly smell. I just brushed it off, making a dumb joke like, well, you know, just some wet deer. This just means that our smell won't travel too far in this heavy, damp air. JD looked at me and said, "Bro, that smells like death, putrid, like a cow that's been in the sun too long." We end up staying, choosing to stick through it. The smell ends up becoming very strong, but at the same time we didn't want to go around in the woods. You know, there's mountain lions that can follow us on the day or night, or even worse, being accused by some forest ranger. So instead, we decide that we're just gonna take the drive down to the gas station. However, JD's vehicle won't start up. Well, I guess it's gonna be sleepy time, followed by hunting, while we wait for a hillbilly mechanic to come and jumpstart this car. All the while, the smell just seems to be seeping through the vents and the cracks in the windows. It gets to the point where I'm just retching in the car. Enough is enough, and we both decide that if something had gone and died, we prefer not to be stuck next to the rotting corpse. So we get out of the car. We're parked in the middle of this gravel kind of parking area, and there were nothing but woods on the other sides. So just directly west of us was this swamp, and the swamp was full of boar and some deer and just other critters that you might find there. And I'm just sitting here loading my magazine into my rifle. But that's when I notice that JD is scanning the tree line with his eyes. He seems to be on edge, but I'm feeling fine, so I just dismiss it. After we're done suiting up, we make our way down the small footpath, which is about 2 feet wide, and then it goes down into the swamp. However, for some reason, when we get to the tree line, both of us just stop dead in our tracks and just started staring into the woods. We stared for a few minutes before either of us spoke. It was almost kind of like shining a flashlight in the mine shaft. And something in the deepest part of my brain was telling me to go back to the clearing and wait in the center until daylight. So we end up doing what any caveman would have done in that situation. And so we grunted out a few excuses to preserve our manhood, and then went back and sat down by his car. Because personally, I'm not gonna go through the woods at 3:15 in the morning when there's mountain lions, weed growers, and God knows what else is out there. The smell ended up kind of receding back into the forest, so we just busy ourselves with checking our rifles and talking about girls and politics. After a while, the smell started coming back again, and we began to voice our concern that something that smelled just dead was moving around. As the smell starts growing more and more oppressive, I start hearing branches and twigs breaking in the undergrowth. Whatever it is, it's moving, and I don't like that one bit. At this point, I'm thinking it's a mountain lion that's all covered in gore from a recent kill. But that doesn't make sense, because it would be going full territorial mode on us. That wouldn't have been out of the question, but that's not what it was. My first thought was that we either had a ranger with a sick sense of humor, a drug grower with a great sense of humor, or worse, a serial killer. Either way, weapons were shouldered, bolts were closed on loaded chambers, and lights pointed towards where the sound was. There was just nothing, just a smell, and a slower, and then it stopped. The smell is everywhere now, and whoever it is sitting far enough back in the tree line so as not to be silhouetted by our lights. They're smart. There was no eye shine, which ruled out just about any other animal that I could think of other than a boar, which makes enough noise to be easily noticeable. Once again, the caveman brain rears up deep within me and tells me we need to build a fire right now. So what do? JD and I build a fire. Throughout this whole affair, other than a few moments, we've been mostly quiet. The fire seems to give us some kind of comfort, and whatever it is seems to back off into the forest, if only for a while. As the fire burned hot, we started joking again, having a decent time, convincing ourselves that it was just a big cat or something. However, there's only so much timber in the gravel clearing, and after a while, we would have to venture out of the firelight to keep the fire going, and that time came. As the fire burned down to embers, the smell came back more oppressive than before, and with that smell came an almost oppressive feeling of fear. Not just a normal fear, but an intense, guttural fear that made your muscles tense, your stomach turn, and your eyes grow wide. Every fiber of our being told us to get more wood, to keep the fire going. Only with the fire would we survive the night. So cautiously, we walked to the tree line, barely able to see it from the dying light. We've been trying to save the battery of our flashlights. I was on guard duty. My rifle would be a better standoff weapon than the one that JD had. At this point, my adrenaline is flowing from a feeling that something just isn't right out here. JD then leans down to the undergrowth to pick up a stick, reaching into the tree line. He screams and falls backward while branches break right in front of him. He gets up, freaking out, dusting himself off. He says that he saw something staring at him. Sunken eyes, ashy gray skin, and he said it smiled at him. Not so much a smile like a human. This intense moment was followed by another hour of this game of us building the fire back up and retreating back into the woods, and then the fire dying and then it coming back into view again. I should note that this entire time, quote unquote he, as we were calling it now, was circling us. I guess probing our defense, seeing if it could find a way to get up close without being seen. By the time that 5 a.m. rolled around, we had exhausted almost all of the dry firewood that wasn't within the tree line, except for the tall grass on the northeast side of the road. Well, of course, we do what we have to do and slowly pick our way over to the tall grass. By this point, I have taped the flashlight to my rifle, and I switch it on as I leave the fire to get some more dry grass. As JD is filling his hands with tinder, I check my right hand side and look down the road. I wish I hadn't. Just as I swing the flashlight over the road, I see him for the first time. Grayish black, with matted gray fur, or some kind of skin. To be honest, I couldn't really tell. It crossed the 10-yard track, really quick, hunched over, maybe 5.5 to 6 feet tall, moving almost like a gorilla. Something in my head just started screaming, "It's over. It knows you've seen it. It's not just being territorial. It's circling like a predator." We ran back to the fire and popped the dry grass on top and waited for the smell to recede. Except it didn't. If anything, it got closer, more intense, and this time we heard it moving closely. So we pushed out and got into the trunk of JD's car and listened as it passed behind and in front of his car and back into the trees. I decided that we either make the 3-mile run down the dark countryside to the gas station and pray that the lights are still on, or we build a fire big enough that one of the farmers or someone driving on the main road can see it. We end up deciding that sprinting the 3 miles to the dark countryside, guns on our backs, could get us devoured by whatever this is, or shot by a farmer. So we did the next best thing. I pulled a small tree out of the ground. I'm not talking about a bush. I'm talking about a small 8 to 9 foot tree. It's amazing what adrenaline can do for you. So much adrenaline that your facial muscles are drawn tight. Your eyes dilate to nearly black. In any case, the fire burns bright, very bright, and after a while, he retreats further back into the woods, and this tree happened to burn for a long time. Eventually, maybe 30 minutes after throwing the tree on the fire, these 3 lifted trucks came barreling down the road and into the gravel parking area. The first truck had an insane amount of those off-road lights on the bull bar and on the roof, which actually lit up the whole area like it was the sun. The smell instantly goes away, but still, no one gets out. Then, a man wearing a National Guard t-shirt and ACU pants hops out of the second truck with his hand on his hip. He had a concealed pistol. He questions us for about 10 minutes, makes us disarm and clear our chambers, and set our rifles in JD's car. He tells us there's a burn ban on, and we shouldn't be out here screwing around. We explained that our car died, and we came out hunting and made that as a single fire. He just looks at us strange whenever I say the word hunting. He walks back to truck number 1, and comes back and tells us not to come back there unless we have all of our ducks in a row. The third truck drives over, and a man hops out and starts to jumpstart our car. I shake his hand and say thanks, and he gives me a worried but sympathetic look. He doesn't say very much but walks back to his truck and just simply drives away. Truck number 2 leaves shortly after, once we get everything packed up. The window of truck number 1 rolls down, and the chubby man calls me and JD over and says, "There's no boar here. If you're hunting for boar, you best be looking further down the road, at least at the other end of the county." Now, I know there's tons of boar here. I'm not gonna mouth off to the hillbilly militia that just saved my life. So I thank him for his advice. JD and I get back in his car, debating whether or not he had gone away with all the commotion. Just as soon as the big man had pulled out, the smell returned yet again. Fuck no. We hop on the gravel road, drive down the highway, drive past a few farms and make our way towards the border of the county. We noticed, however, that we're still being followed by a small white Honda, and guess who's sitting in the front seat? The big guy and the other hillbilly militiaman. They follow us all the way out of the county, and then simply turn around. I'm not sure what me and JD saw out there, but one thing's for sure, I'm never going back into those woods again. As far as those men go, well, I'm not sure who they were. If you all have any ideas, let me know. The reason I'm sharing this story is to find out if this has happened to anyone else. This is 100% true, and it's really hard for me to share because anytime that I have tried to tell someone else about it, I get laughed at and accused of just trying to pull their leg. I recently saw an article about a woman who was hunting, and she saw what seemed to be an invisible creature that she described as almost like a predator from the movie of the same name. I read her story and saw the picture she took of this thing. Now, as far as her picture goes, I personally think it's a combination of flare from the sun and a close-up of possibly her face or something. I'm not dismissing her story though, actually quite the opposite. since I have also encountered something similar. And it's actually what's prompted me to seek out if anyone else has encountered one of these things in the woods. Now let me tell you, when I was about 5 years old, I was playing by the edge of the woods behind my grandmother's house. I played there often and my grandma just kept an eye on me from the kitchen or living room. She would come out every once in a while just to see what I was up to. I was obsessed with digging in the dirt and collecting unusual rocks and arrowheads that littered the land where my grandmother lived. I should mention this is Midwest Illinois, not too far from the Cahokia Mounds, so finding arrowheads was actually not that uncommon. Anyways, that day I remember picking out a spot to dig. I had been out there for quite a while because I remember I had a pretty decent sized hole going, and that's when something caught my eye up in the tree that I was next to. I almost don't know how to explain it, but it looked like almost a heat wave coming off the branch of the tree. It was fall. I remember this because I had my jacket on, and I remember thinking that my mom was going to be pissed at me because I had dirt around the bottom of the arms from digging. I also remember there being a lot of leaves on the ground. Anyways, I am staring at this quote-unquote heat wave, and I realized it has a human shape. So here I am, 5 years old, and wondering why there's an invisible man in the tree. I remember feeling scared but unsure what to do. Then, it started moving and making a faint clicking sound. That's when I decided that maybe I wasn't supposed to be seeing this, and so I hightailed it back to the house. My grandmother saw I was pretty shaken, and I remember telling her that I just saw an angel. In my 5-year-old mind, I didn't know what else it could be. I had never heard of a ghost or monsters, so to me it had to be an angel because that's all my little mind could think of. So now jumping ahead to when I was about 12 years old, by this time the encounter was way out of my mind. I love watching action and sci-fi movies. My dad had rented the Predator movie. As we're watching the movie, and the first time that you see it invisible, I almost shit my pants. All the memories from that day digging in the dirt came flooding back. I even asked my dad if it was real, or if he knew if anyone or any animal that had the same ability that I didn't know about. He told me it was all fake. It wasn't like it is today, where I could just look it up on the internet. So again, I just put this out of my mind. 2004. I'm grown now. I have 3 small children. I just went through a separation from my spouse. I moved to the next town over to an apartment with my kids. These apartments are all one-level duplexes with there being 5 buildings. I am at the very last apartment of the last building. The apartments are considered in town, but are on the outskirts. There is a ditch that runs behind the buildings with a chain link fence that separates the backyard from the ditch itself. There's about 6 to 7 trees on our side of the fence. If you follow the ditch a little bit, you hit a small forest that eventually leads to the country with a larger forest and farmland. I am a smoker, but I wouldn't smoke in the apartment because of the kids, so I often went out to the back porch. One night, I was up late doing laundry and stuff after the kids went to bed. I decided to take a smoke break before I went to sleep. I am back there on the porch and I started hearing this faint clicking sound. I immediately looked to the ditch because I had seen a groundhog out there a few days before, and I thought that maybe he was out there again. The yard is faintly lit from the outside light that is by the playground that is to the right of my back porch. I didn't turn on my porch light. I didn't normally if I was just going out for a quick smoke. I didn't see any groundhog or movement from the ditch, so I go back to smoking my cigarette. The clicking sound keeps happening, and a slight shift of movement makes me look up into the tree to the left of my porch, and it's there. The same invisible thing I had seen when I was 5. It's like a distortion, but in a humanoid shape. It was crouching down on the branch with an arm out, holding onto the trunk of the tree. I couldn't believe it. Is this really happening? as it came to kill me from seeing it all those years ago. All I could think about was my kids in the apartment sleeping. So I ran inside and slammed and locked the door. I ran to the kids' room and I made sure all the windows were locked. Then I just turned out the lights in the living room and I started staring out the blinds towards the tree to see if I could catch another glimpse of it. I sat there for about a good 10 minutes and I couldn't see anything. I began to think that maybe I was just tired and that my head was playing tricks on me. Just as I was finally talking myself down, my neighbor's dog comes running across the yard and starts barking at the tree, at the same branch that I had seen this thing at. That pretty much freaked me the fuck out because this dog was not a barker. I had actually never heard him even bark at anything, even at the groundhog that had been hanging out in the back. This barking went on for a few minutes until I heard the neighbor who owns the dog call him back inside. The dog then turned to go back home, stopping every few feet to look back at the branch of the tree until he was out of my sight. I didn't sleep that night, and I have never seen anything like it again. I don't know what to think of it. I am a grown person. I have kids and a good career. I just want to know if anyone else has ever had an experience like this. I know what I saw, whether you believe me or not. Thanks for listening. My friend was on a solo backpack trip through Yosemite. He started talking to a guy he met about his trip. The guy said that he used to do solo trips often, but would never go again after experiencing something horrific on his last trip. The guy said he was 2 days into a 6-day hike in the middle of the wilderness when he came upon a dead man in a suit with a bullet hole in his head, and the body was very fresh, like it just happened. He never heard any gunshots, and he could not see signs of anyone else around. He was filled with dread and he felt like somebody was watching him. That's when he took off running back down the trail that he came from. He ended up hiking for a few days and nights without rest back to the trailhead. He said the nighttime was the absolute worst. Every noise he heard and shadows he saw felt like something was stalking him in the dark. He told the authorities when he returned and never heard back from them. He wondered if maybe the man was shot and thrown from a helicopter. My friend said that he had to stay with a group for a couple of nights after hearing this story, and he as well cut his trip a bit short, feeling scared. I never really knew my grandma's brother well. All I can remember is that he was a real energetic man who lived on the hill where my grandparents resided, in the Navajo REZ, not far from the Chaco Wash. My grandma's brother used to reside a couple of miles north of my grandparents' place. His dwelling, more like a shack, sat on the outskirts of the Badlands. When we were young, we were instructed to steer clear of this place because it was considered evil. I never questioned why. I just accepted the warning and avoided the area. As time went by, my grandma's brother passed away under strange circumstances. He was found dead in his house. Even though he would occasionally visit my grandparents, his absence for a few days was unusual. My older uncle went to his house and discovered his lifeless body. What was strange was the hasty funeral arrangements that followed. Normally, in Navajo tradition, funerals are held on the 4th day after the person's passing, but in this case, the funeral was conducted immediately, without even informing the family. Curiosity led me to sneak over to his house to see what it looked like inside before it was torn down, as per my grandmother's request. The inside of the house felt eerie. It was a one-room, shed-like structure with faded and some bleached wooden boards for walls. The boards didn't fit tightly, allowing sunlight to filter in, illuminating the floating dust particles.
The bed was modest, adorned with a green army blanket. There weren't that many decorations, mostly old shearing tools and knives, with no photographs in sight. An old wood stove and a small table occupied the space, alongside two crates at the far end of the room. One wooden crate laid open, revealing its contents, while the other, made of metal, was locked. After my brief exploration, I left the house, noting its vantage point, overlooking the Badlands to the west. Several years passed, and my older uncle decided to build his dream house on the exact site where my grandmother's brother had lived. Despite my grandmother's concerns about the location, my uncle was determined to proceed with the construction. He envisioned a single-story ranch-style house, equipped with all modern stuff, which was actually very rare on the REZ. The construction began, and everything seemed to progress easy at first. However, strange occurrences soon began to fall on the workers. Tools would go missing, and he said that there would be shadows moving within the house, and blood was discovered smeared on the walls. Even stranger were the tracks found in the sand around the house, leading from the west towards the Badlands. My uncle, an experienced hunter, couldn't identify these tracks, so he looked for help with my grandpa, who also found them perplexing. Eventually, my grandma intervened, recognizing the signs of a skinwalker. She instructed my uncle on the necessary precautions, and work on the house stopped until this issue could be resolved. Despite being careful, strange events continued to happen in the house, but my uncle pressed on. He eventually completed the house, and even yet, the disturbances persisted, driving his family to discomfort and fear. Even my grandmother's attempts to calm the spirits seemed futile against whatever forces were at play. On one specific evening, my cousins and I stayed over, and we experienced firsthand the strange nature of this house. The generator was shut off, and then strange noises echoed through the darkness, and it almost felt like some presence seemed to stalk us from the shadows. Only the intervention of my grandparents, armed with traditional remedies and fierce determination, brought us relief from all of this. Another incident involved my younger cousin. She was alone in the truck outside, and she said as she looked to the west side of the house, she saw a pale, humanoid figure peering down at her with dark, soulless eyes. Her screaming alerted the family to come outside, but this creature had vanished before they could confront it. Even with my grandmother, a woman of great strength, she had vowed to confront whatever was there and expel it from the house. My grandma was very traditional and practiced native medicine. She also used sacred crystals to find and heal people. While looking into her crystals, she would also practice reading people's hands. There's been a few instances where she has been used to locate missing people, and also found the circumstances of the way the person died. She also had knowledge of the evil way, the dark practice of witchcraft. In native medicine, my grandma had acquired a few secret items and would seek help from another medicine man. They both went into the house and began a ceremony to expel whatever was in it. They went into each room, blessing them with sage and sealing them with ash. When they finally went into the master bedroom, the medicine man started to vomit and bleed from the nose. My grandma said that she had a nauseous feeling and felt dizzy, almost fainting. They both retreated from the room and closed the door, sealing it with ash. The medicine man said the room was the source of evil, attracting evil spirits, including skinwalkers. He said he would try to pinpoint where the evil was coming from, but would need to go in alone. He began by lighting up a medicine bundle, taking bitter root, and marking his forehead with ash before entering the room. He described the room as very cold, feeling the presence of numerous spirits in the closet. Upon opening the closet, he saw a black mist on the floor, swirling like the eye of a black hurricane. He began the ceremony to close the portal, but was met with resistance. The medicine man heard a voice from the swirling mass, telling him that only the one who summoned the evil could close the portal. However, he continued the ceremony, and the mass started to diminish and eventually disappeared. Blessing the room with sage and corn pollen, he attached the burnt log to the top of the interior of the closet and sealed the door with ash. He warned my grandma that whatever was summoned was evil and too strong to keep under control, and so his recommendation was that my uncle abandon the house. Despite the warnings, my aunt, her boyfriend, and their 3-year-old son moved into the house, believing it to be a perfectly good place to save money on rent payments. However, they soon encountered paranormal experiences. One evening, my aunt heard footsteps walking down the hallway, followed by something crawling into bed with her and her son. Whatever it was, quickly got out of bed, threw off the covers, and stepped on her boyfriend's neck, causing him to choke for air. They then decided to leave the house immediately, leaving their belongings behind. Later, my younger uncle Max and his friend Leo decided to spend the night at the house to investigate. While they were there, they experienced a terrifying encounter with different spirits, including that of a little girl and a faceless figure, making them flee the house in fear. Even after these encounters, the house has remained vacant, with strange occurrences continuing to happen, such as lights turning on despite the lack of electricity. Despite the warnings and strange events, the house stands abandoned, with its curtains drawing open, as if someone is still inside, watching.
Skinwalker is a forest in far north Norway. I recently moved to Laxalev for work. Even though it was January, I figured that since I was out in the wilderness, that I might as well go out into the woods to explore a bit. There wasn't a whole lot to do in town. Besides, I heard the trails in this part of the country were pretty nice. There was only a few blocks between my house and the edge of the woods. Anyways, I grabbed a bottle of water and a little bag with trail mix. I was going on a trail after all, and off I went. It had snowed the day before. I guess snow is pretty common up here. It was a pretty soft snow, the kind that ski resorts prefer. It would crunch loud as I stepped on it. Despite the trail being covered up by the snow, I was pretty confident in my ability to keep track of the trail, since the forest was somewhat dense, and the opening where the trees were removed was distinguishable, and so I wasn't worried about getting lost. It was still pretty early in the afternoon, only about 1 p.m. I wasn't worried about the sun going down. Then again, I had only moved from Virginia fairly recently, so Norway might as well have been a different planet in terms of climate and daylight. At least, that's what I thought. It might have just been a big change that I was seeing as being bigger than it was. After about half an hour, I wasn't terribly deep in the woods. I was moving at a pretty slow pace after all. I had passed a lot of scenery, but nothing that really stood out. Just a lot of trees, a few which had fallen. It was at this point that I realized something that surprised me just a little bit. I wasn't alone in the woods. I stopped briefly when I noticed that a few flakes were weakly drifting to the ground, and noticed that I could hear something else. I could hear the sound of snow crunching under a human's foot. They didn't sound like they were wearing heavy boots or anything. It was much more quiet. I could only really tell it was a person because it was clearly 2 feet. They sounded distant, just barely close enough for me to actually hear it. The woods were pretty quiet. It wasn't windy or anything like that. That's when I saw her in the distance. A woman. Even though my memory is shaky, I say that she was about the ballpark of about 50 yards away. I could just barely see her moving between the trees, drifting almost casually through the snow. But something struck me about her appearance though, so I knew I had to get closer to her to know if I was right or not. So I pursued her. I didn't want to call out to her yet, but I did begin trying to hurry up. She didn't seem like she was moving very fast, but I was struggling to keep sight of her in the forest. Finally, I was about 10 yards away from her, and now I was close enough to confirm what I thought I had seen before. The woman was completely naked. I figured this woman must need help, that she must have been on something, or she was mentally ill. Nobody walks around in the snowy woods with no clothes on, with nothing on. "Excuse me," I piped up, but she didn't acknowledge me. She must have been on some serious drugs. "Excuse me," I repeated, a bit more loud this time. She kept walking, even though when I said that, her pace had slowed just a little bit. I didn't mean to stare, considering the situation, but she really was gorgeous from what I saw of her. Without going into any details, I'll just say her body, and what little of her face I managed to see, was damn near perfect. I shook off the distraction and began trying to approach her. I got to about 5 yards from her when she suddenly stopped. It was such a sudden thing that I stopped too. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you okay?" I asked in the best Norwegian I could, even though I knew it wasn't very good. She stood motionless in the forest for a few seconds before quickly turning to me. I then got a good look at her face. She didn't seem bothered by the cold. Her flowing blonde hair looked to have just come from a salon. Her body didn't seem to be reacting to the cold at all. No frostbite, no bluish tint, no shivering, not even one single goosebump. What really struck me about her was her eyes. Her eyes were an icy, cold-looking blue, almost gray. She had no expression, and despite having turned to me, she didn't seem to really notice that I was there. Her face and body language didn't indicate that she was actually acknowledging me. She never looked directly at me. I figured that she must really be on some serious drugs. I stopped for a second or two to think of what she might be on, before remembering her current situation. Ma'am, are you alright?" I repeated. No response. "I can call a hospital for you if you need me to," I offered. At that point, I realized that I didn't bring my cell phone with me. Shit, what would I do now? I had no way of contacting authorities with this drugged up naked lady in the middle of the frozen woods, but I didn't feel comfortable just leaving her out here to go and get help. What if a search team wouldn't be able to find her in time? How long has she been out here anyways? I figured that my best option would be trying to get her to follow me back to town. "Ma'am, would you like my coat?" I offered. It was better than just letting her freeze, after all. She didn't react to my question at all, despite the cold. I took my coat off and began to approach her. That's when I noticed something I didn't notice before. Her fingers and toes now seemed to be a blue color. She didn't seem at all frostbitten not a moment ago. Where did that come from so fast? I knew I had to get her out of here, and fast. As I got closer, there was more frostbite I hadn't noticed before on her nose and ears. Suddenly, she turned away from me and began walking away. "Hey, wait!" I called out to her. No response. Suddenly, her pace quickened. A few seconds later, she was running. And a few seconds after that, she was out of sight. Damn it, I shouted. I would have to try to follow her footprints in the snow now. But that's when I noticed that she wasn't leaving any footprints. What the hell was going on here? A naked lady walking aimlessly in the middle of a Norwegian winter with randomly appearing frostbite, and she wasn't leaving any footprints? Was she on drugs? Or was I? I thought about just turning back and trying to go back to town, but I still thought it would be better to find her and lead her back. I would just grab her and carry or drag her if necessary. I wasn't gonna let this lady freeze to death while I could do something about it, even if she was apparently levitating. It was then at that point that I realized that I didn't know where I was. In my attempts to get to her, I had lost track of the trail. Well, now I felt stupid. My own footprints, I thought. I turned around and found that my footprints were also gone. My trail now just started where I was standing at the moment. Had the snow filled them in, or was I going crazy? I know for a fact, though, that I wasn't levitating. It was at this revelation that I was becoming afraid. Something was, seriously, wrong here. What could I do now? I didn't know where the lady was anymore, and I didn't know how to get back to town, even if I did find her. This place is a big expanse of forest. It eventually extends back to a mountain range. Unfortunately, the trees were too thick to see the mountains for reference. Where the fuck was I? I could see one thing, however. The sun was starting to go down. The sun goes down pretty early around here. I guess it was a mistake to go out this late, since I figured I would have been home by now. I decided that all I could really do was just start walking the same direction I thought I had come from. I picked the direction that had been directly behind me when I lost sight of the woman. I figured that if I could find the trail, it would be easy. But I felt terrible leaving her that way. But I needed to know where the hell I was before I could effectively help her. I was now considering just rushing home and calling the authorities to be the best available option. But first, I needed to find home. I walked for what felt like hours, through snow and trees, without ever finding a trail. I didn't know if my mind was playing tricks on me, similar to my footprints disappearing, or if I had actually gone in the wrong direction. I paused to look around when I noticed a woman walking off in the distance. Relative to where I was, she was at 3:30, about 20 yards away. I stared at her for a few seconds, realizing that she was actually looking at me. The fact that she was looking at me was creepier than when she wasn't. I was frozen in place, too confused to approach her. I knew I needed to help her, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to anymore. All of this seemed so off. She then began taking a few slow steps towards me, to where I was. I don't know why, but I was getting scared now. I took a few steps back to attempt to match the ground she was gaining on me. She didn't seem determined to get to me. In fact, despite looking at me, she didn't seem like she actually noticed me. I was, for some reason, apprehensive to turn away from her and just run. I was still clinging to the idea that this was just some normal woman, out of her mind, on drugs, who also needed my help. My own pace was beginning to slow down. I don't know why, but I wanted to get away from her, for some reason. But my body just wasn't moving the way it should have been. On top of that, I was so cold, it was like ice was forming in my blood, and she was catching up to me pretty quickly. "Ma'am, if you need help, I can help you," I said. "We can get back to town. Lakasalev, you know where that is, right? It's just on the outside of the woods here. Do you want me to help you?" No response. I looked down and noticed that her hands and feet were frostbitten. There was also patches of frostbite all over her body now. Had her condition become more severe? When she got closer, the frostbite was also on her lips, turning them a blue color. Her chest and face were slowly becoming flushed in a frosty blue. "Ma'am, your frostbite is getting worse. We need to get you to town. Here, take my coat," I said. I was actually becoming panicked at her bizarre behavior and this entire situation. There really was something severely wrong here. A large clump of snow fell from a branch above my head and crashed on my head. It didn't hurt, but I had to wipe the snow from my eyes. It took little effort getting it out. I looked up from my struggle to notice her now standing very close to me, nearly 3 feet away. That's when I lost it. I began to wheel myself away from her. I took off running, not caring which way I was heading anymore. As long as I could get away from that monster, that thing. She wasn't human, or if she was, she wasn't a normal human. When I looked up at her that time, her body was completely covered in frostbite. Her entire skin was a deep blue color, patches of decay. Her forearms down and her legs on down were skeletal. Her face was mutilated by frostbite, her ears and nose missing, the rims of her lips missing. Her chest was actually missing entirely, with a large patch of mutilation carved into her chest by frostbite, exposing just a small amount of her rib cage. I was just about out of my mind. I was actually running now. I had no idea where I would end up. I was just hoping to find the edge of the woods before she might have found me. I couldn't tell at all if I was getting closer to safety or further into the woods. Then I kind of wondered if just escaping the woods would be enough. Would she follow me out? I didn't know what to think anymore. That thing, obviously, wasn't human anymore, assuming it ever really was. So I didn't even know if it would conform to human logic. All I could do was cycle through begging not to be found, begging to escape somewhere else, begging to escape somewhere safe, cursing my entire decision to go walking out in the woods, cursing the woods themselves, asking what the hell she was. All of this. It was all I could do while running to avoid going crazy. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it was making the whole thing worse. I ran for what must have been another few hours, and it was dark now. As I was running, I tripped over a root, steered sideways, and slammed my back into a tree. It was now too dark for me to see anything, and I was now too tired to even move. If she were to find me, that's all there was to it. I would have to rest, build up some strength. I backed myself up against the tree I had collided with and stared into the blackness, hoping not to get attacked. I remember the food I brought with me and pulled out my bottle of water. All of the liquid had frozen solid. I found it very strange because I didn't really think it was cold enough for that to happen, especially since it had been in my coat pocket the entire time. Maybe I was going crazy, or maybe I was just losing it. Well, I couldn't drink ice, so I moved on to the trail mix. It was fine and gave me a bit of strength. Stopping to eat actually gave me the chance to try to collect myself. I could really only wonder what the fuck that thing was, why I was seeing so many weird things going on with the snow and ice. There had to be some kind of connection, but I wasn't about to approach any solid ideas as to what it was. As I sat in the dark, I could hear snow crunching somewhere. It was pitch black, but I could tell it was somewhere to my right. I was too exhausted to move now. All I could really do was sit against the tree and hope she didn't find me, or at least hope that whatever she would do to me wouldn't be too bad. But for some reason I doubted that. When I looked at her back then, she was looking at me for just a second. When I could see what she really was, that frostbitten body, her eyes stayed, but they were glazed over, like she was drugged or something. For just a second she looked right at me. I can't even think of what she might have wanted to do to me, but I'm not really liking any of my options right now. As I sat there, listening to the distant crunching. I focused so intently, I could feel every single snowflake that was hitting me. They seemed to be getting colder, somehow. The entire forest seemed to be dropping in temperature. I honestly wasn't sure I would live to see her catch me. I might end up freezing first. I was trying to think that maybe I shouldn't just be sitting here, but I couldn't decide which was more dangerous, walking around hoping not to be found, or sitting in one spot hoping not to be found. I wasn't sure what to do either way. I looked behind the tree to still see nothing in the dark. I was pretty quickly darting my eyes and head around, desperately trying to get a visual on something, anything. I couldn't even see the tree I was leaning against. It must have been a new moon or something. I was so paranoid. I was pretty quickly losing track of time. I had no idea what time it might be, but things were starting to get blurry. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because out of nowhere, I opened my eyes to see broad daylight. In hindsight, I kinda wish I'd been able to stay awake. Even though nothing happened, something easily could have. In fact, whatever that thing was, seemed to have such a good grasp on the woods. I'm actually surprised she didn't find me. The only thing I can really think of is that she must have found me, but thought it would be too easy if I was sleeping when she did it. I looked to my right and saw footprints in the snow. Not a trail, just two footprints, side by side, like somebody was hovering over me, landed right there, and flew away. Was she watching me the entire night? Fuck that. I think that might actually be worse than if she caught me, 'cause now I know she's toying with me. I'm not sure if she considered me more prey or a toy, but I didn't like either option. Now that it was morning and I had rested, I decided I needed to start running again, trying to find the trail, the edge of the woods, anything. Honestly, I was sore as hell from all that running, but I guess I couldn't avoid more of it. I started off at a slow walk, keeping my eyes out for whatever that thing might be. This was a bit difficult, since I wanted desperately to just take off and run. I had to think about where I was going, instead of just zipping around blindly. I thought of looking for moss on trees, since I knew the woods were to the southeast of town. Conveniently, the trees had no moss at all, nor did the nearby rocks. I tried to think back on where the sun set last night, but I wasn't awake to see it rise, and I was running so blindly I didn't notice where it set. The sun was currently to my left, but I didn't know what time it was, or what direction that was, so that was worthless. I wish I was an expert tracker. I'm sure some hunter or navigator would be able to get me out of the woods. So now, I just had to walk, hoping I was going in the right direction, hoping I wouldn't run into that thing again. I walked for a while, what had to be about 2 hours or so. I still didn't seem to be anywhere near the edge of the woods. I still couldn't see anything. It was mostly just a flat plain of snow with trees all around it. I kinda wish they had put a sign up at the edge of the woods, warning people not to go into it. Then again, I'm pretty sure a sign that said, "Warning, naked zombie lady," would be dismissed as a joke. At this point, I realized I was stupid and just ate a handful of snow. I completely forgot that snow was just fluffy water, and just went without liquid because my water bottle was frozen. I must have been so confused from where I was exhausted that I didn't even think of it. With that refresher, I began to realize I was being followed again. I could hear the snow crunching from behind me again. I turned to face it, but there was nothing there. I gazed around, but still couldn't see anything. I needed to hurry up before that thing caught up to me, so I got up and kept moving. It was hours later, and I still didn't see any scenery that looked even remotely unique. I had no idea these woods were this big. I realized that nobody really knew me, so nobody would be looking for me either way. I wasn't really counting on that anyways. Honestly, I just needed to find a way out. At this rate, I wasn't sure if I was just walking in circles or not. I could have been for all I knew. At this point, I realized the sun was hanging low. That must have been west. I knew I needed to go northwest, so all I had to do was head in some direction from there. I didn't know where I would come out, but it was worth a shot, so I started walking. I walked for several more hours in what I assumed was a straight line. It didn't seem to be taking me anywhere. I looked up trying to focus on the sun, trying to see which way I was going. Around then, I turned around to see the path where I was coming from. That's when I saw her, the woman, standing directly across from me. She was far enough away that I couldn't see if there was any frostbite on her this time. She didn't look like it, but she was staring directly at me and walking towards me. I was in a better position this time, or at least I thought. I knew where the hell I was going. I turned left and started running towards the sun. I knew that there was a highway that went through a part of the woods. I wasn't so intent on getting to the highway as my definite destination. If she blocks my path directly to town, I can find some semblance of civilization. I ran for a few minutes before realizing that I had lost her, or at least it looked like I did. I wasn't sure anymore. I knew she could be anywhere. I slowed to a stop and surveyed my surroundings. I couldn't see her anywhere, nor any sign of her. A small amount of sunlight was peeking through the trees now, but I could tell it would most likely be setting within the hour. I had to find my way out before that happened. Otherwise, I would lose my only usable reference point. I took off running again, sprinting through the forest, dodging between trees. I had no idea how long I was running for, maybe 45 minutes, but it was also getting darker. I was losing light and my ability to navigate. I could only try to keep running in a single direction, and then just keep going that same way once the sun was down. I felt I had a pretty good system now. Surely, I couldn't get lost if I kept in a straight line. The only thing I really had to worry about was getting interrupted. At that point, I crashed into a tree. I had been running for hours. I must have been tired again. My coat wasn't really protecting me from the environment the way it should have been also. As I slowly rose to my feet, I saw an opening in the trees. It was the trail. I had finally found it again. I climbed back to 2 feet and staggered onto it. I felt a lot better knowing I had found a sign that I was on the right track. I then realized I had something of a conundrum. Should I really follow the trail, or should I keep going in a straight line the way I was? I remember seeing a map of the trail outside, seeing that it wasn't just one trail, but a huge network. I don't remember any specific directions, but I knew that just blindly following the trail might not necessarily be a good idea, especially now that I was already on a good path. I decided the trail could screw itself and kept walking in a straight line. It was also very dark now. I could barely see. I couldn't quite move as quickly as I was before, but I wasn't about to just stop. I didn't trust my safety to that monster. It was now practically pitch black again. I didn't know what time it must have been. I had been switching between walking and running for more than 24 hours now. When the fuck would these woods end? These woods couldn't have been this expansive. They just couldn't have been. I must have been just completely lost at this point. I didn't know what to think at that point, and I still didn't know, to be honest. I was lost in thought, and then I realized the sun went down. The night wasn't quite as dark as the night before, but it was still nearly pitch black. I wouldn't just be running blindly anymore, so I kept walking straight. I felt in front of me for trees, groping blindly like an idiot. I must have looked like one to that sadistic bitch. I went on grabbing at nothing for several hours. It had to be past midnight when I felt something that wasn't natural. I felt a quick brush of a wispy, spiderweb-like form. It was hair. That woman's hair. That thing's hair. I stepped back for a second, looking around in the darkness. I couldn't see her anywhere. I could just barely make out the trees around me. I stood mostly blind, helpless against this monster in the dark. At this point, not being able to see her was worse than actually seeing her. That paranoia that grips you as a little kid in your bedroom, staring at the closet, waiting for the boogeyman to come out and eat you. I finally took a step, not feeling any sign of her anywhere. I kept taking a few very slow steps, trying to make some kind of headway. At this rate, I wasn't sure I would even notice if I was out of the woods or not. I could be standing in a field and I might not really notice. I debunked all of this when I felt the bark of a tree in front of me. I began maneuvering around it, keeping at its base to avoid losing my direction. As I rounded the trunk, I felt something. I felt two icy cold, skeletal hands lightly caressed the sides of my neck. I felt what must have been, whatever the fuck that thing was. Its shredded lips lightly kissed my ear. At that moment, I fucking lost it. I turned around, took a swing, hitting nothing, and turned back, taking off running. Kinda funny how quickly I abandoned my plan of just staying slow. I have no idea what the fuck that thing wanted, but it wouldn't be getting it from me. I sprinted through the woods, occasionally bumping into the edge of a tree, heading where I prayed, which was northwest. I was in a full panic, just barely keeping it together enough to remember where I was supposed to be going. It was a flashback to the night before, where I just ran blindly and got myself lost as I was. At least now, I could hope I had stayed in the right direction this time, but I wasn't banking on it. I had to avoid trees in the dark, hoping that lady wasn't behind me or in front of me. But that might be the thing that made me panic the most. The idea that I would just run right into her in the dark and never see her coming. I couldn't shake that feeling. I never felt like she wasn't right next to me. I knew she was always somewhere close by, watching me, waiting for whatever she wanted from me. At some point in the dark, I suddenly ran right into something. It was low and hard. It seemed to be a big rock. I felt one of my shin bones shatter on contact from how hard I was running, combined with the shape of it. I went flying over it, rode over the top of it, and landed in what seemed to be a collection of smaller rocks. I then started groping my way around before finding my footing. The rocks I was standing on were loose, so I ended up falling again. My hand landed just the right way for me to get an idea of the rock itself. It felt so strange. It actually didn't seem like stone. It was too light for that. I picked it up and felt its shape, discovering it to be a bone. I felt around a bit more and found that all of the small rocks I was laying on were actually bones, some of them clearly human. I began trying to crawl my way out before brushing my head on something metallic. I picked it up, finding it to be an old lighter. I gave it a few clicks to see if it worked. I have no idea if it did, since I was terrible with lighters. I never could get one to light up. As I sat there, I felt something brush against my leg. It was a hand. I jumped back, assuming it was her. As I backed away, I heard what I can only describe as a hoarse, weak, wheezing noise. I grabbed a large rock, crawling over it, attempting to rest for energy. I wasn't sure how well I could do with that busted leg bone. As I sat back, I could hear snow crunching from behind me. I listened carefully, trying to see exactly where it was coming from. How close was it? It was in the bone pile apparently. The footsteps suddenly stopped as I heard total silence for a few seconds. The wheezing kicked back, more panic sounding this time, like a person who had their vocal cords cut desperately, trying to talk. I suddenly began hearing a different crunching noise. It sounded like bone breaking. It sounded like flesh tearing. I didn't know what was worse, what was happening, or what might be happening, and not knowing was killing me. I had to know what it was. Curiosity was driving me crazy, even though I dreaded what the answer to my question might be. Finally, I decided I had to see. I peeked over the rock, seeing nothing but darkness, of course. But then I remembered the lighter. I gave it a few flicks before finally getting the damn thing to light. When I looked down, I saw her. I now saw the full scope of the bone pile. It was huge. It looked almost like one of those mass graves that genocides and massacres have been known to produce. There were some animal bones too, deer, birds, dogs, but it seemed like it was mostly human bones. As I looked closely, I saw tooth marks on the bones. As I looked up, I saw exactly what she was doing, the exact source of that noise. It was a man. It looked to be a middle-aged man, or at least what was left of him. His body was missing from around his stomach down. She was holding his torso up, devouring him. She was biting off organs and flesh, breaking bone with her teeth, where it had once wore its disguise as a normal woman, attempting to maintain a sort of dignity or beauty. All of it had mostly been abandoned. Its mouth opened too wide, mostly due to what seemed to be her cheeks missing as she tore off huge chunks of flesh like an animal. She then looked up at me, giving me a frigid look with those eyes. She glared at me, her female dignity returning. She stood, her mouth covered in frozen blood. The man seemed to be fading quickly. His body was blue from frostbite. I have no idea how he was still alive, but he most likely wouldn't be for much longer. As she approached me, she took further notice of the lighter I carried. She seemed to shy away from me when she saw it, like she was afraid of it, but she still approached me, slowly, inching closer. As she approached, I realized what it was. Everything about her was cold. Her body was cold. Her home was cold. Her victims were cold. Her food was cold. So anything with heat must have been something she can't deal with. As she was within arm's reach, I thrust the lighter at her. She quickly backed away before continuing her approach. I tried this a few more times before realizing that I was right. She couldn't stand heat. At this point, I had a crazy idea that I must have gotten from an action movie. I figured that if she was afraid or weakened by heat, I could set her on fire and possibly be done with her for good. As well as I could, I kept the lighter lit up and gently tossed it at her, reaching right into her hair. Her hair, lightly, catching a slight bit of fire before the lighter faded out onto the ground. I couldn't see what was happening, just embers coming from her, apparently burning her hair. I didn't want to stick around. This thing didn't seem to be very mortal, so I didn't want to risk the idea that I had only pissed it off. As best as I could with my busted up leg, I took off running, which actually wasn't very fast, more like limping away, but it was fast enough. I didn't see any really convincing signs that she was following me, but I'll never be sure. Everything after that is just kind of blurry. I have no clue how long I must have been running. It seemed almost like I must have fallen asleep while running, because suddenly I was reaching the highway, staggering out onto the pavement and collapsing. At this point, I blacked out. What happened between then and when I woke up in the hospital was extremely fuzzy. I must have been picked up by somebody at some point, but I don't remember who they were or when they came along. What I do remember was coming to my senses for a few seconds in somebody's car, or it might have been the cab of a truck. The person asked me who I was, and I answered. They asked me what I was doing out in the woods and what happened to me. For all I know, I blacked out again before I could answer. I woke up in the hospital in the afternoon. The doctors and police were asking me what happened to me. I didn't mention the bones, fearing that by doing so, I would end up sending some police officers to their death. I just told them that I had gone for a walk in the woods and became hopelessly lost. One officer asked me about the marks on my body. Apparently, when the woman touched me, she left marks of frostbite on my neck in the shape of skeletal hands. That's when I told them that I had no idea how that came to be. They didn't really seem to press the issue after that. I got home a few days later. I started my job a few days after that. I wasn't really that great in Norwegian, but had a passing knowledge of it. I asked a few coworkers about the woods, about that forest. An older guy told me about the woods being haunted by something, but he didn't really elaborate, and I don't think I really needed him to, since I knew all that I needed to know about it. On some occasions, I feel like I'm still sometimes back there, when I get a sudden chilly draft in my house, and the feeling that I'm being watched. Even in the summer, even after I have moved out the country, which once again for work, the frostbite she left on my neck left a very visible scar. It still does hurt a little bit, especially on cold, snowy days. I don't recommend ever going there, not even for a second. I don't know what that thing was, where she came from, or if she even survived my attack. I was lucky to have gotten away, because I know that if I hadn't found that lighter, I would most likely have ended up the same as that guy. I do still warn you though, that if you ever do decide to go, I can't promise that you'll do any better than I did. And to all the men out there, if you ever see a naked woman out in the woods, don't ever approach her. As a matter of fact, run, turn the other way, and run opposite of her as fast as you can. This incident took place when I was 17. I was with my family. We were going through the mountains near Window Rock, Arizona. It was late at night, and all around us as we drove was darkness and tall trees. We were in a pickup truck. I was sitting in the front with my sister and her husband, who was driving. My two brothers and cousin were sitting back in the bed. All of a sudden, this thing or creature runs out in front of us and across the headlights. At the moment, I thought it was a deer. My brother-in-law, Eddie, said it was a coyote. It happened so fast, but just in case, we do say a prayer. After a few minutes, we soon forgot about it, driving along and talking. When up in front of us, there, just standing in the middle of the county road, are 4 more coyotes. Now, I've seen a lot of coyotes out where we live, but rarely do we see them more than 2 at a time, and even less sitting in the road. Eddie slows the truck, but they stay right there almost as if they're daring him. Then, when it looks like he's going to have to stop or hit them, they walk away towards the shoulder and disappear into the trees. Eddie then makes a remark that something spooky is going on, and he wants to get home as soon as possible. But my sister tells him better safe than sorry, and not to go too fast. Now, the only thing worse to us Navajos than coyotes appearing out of nowhere is the hoot of the owl. Well, most of the time it's no big deal. Just odd-looking birds hunting for mice. When you hear them the way we did, something's not right. It could mean that someone close to you is in danger. The fact is, if they are hunting, they are most likely quiet. Anyways, we start hearing these owl hoots, one after the other, as if they are calling ahead, alerting some dark entity that we are on our way. More curious than that, there were 6 of us in that truck, and I know I counted 6 hoots. The turnoff from the county road is a dirt road, and it is less than 10 minutes from our house. Eddie is driving along, going a little faster than my sister is comfortable with. Looking back over my shoulder, I can see the rest of them there in the bed, bouncing and sliding around a little bit. Only a minute or two down the road, we can see the lights from the houses, still in the distance, but close enough where we're all feeling better about things. But before we get there, Eddie slams on the brakes and yanks the truck to the left. I see something big and black and definitely upright right in front of us. Despite Eddie's efforts, the truck runs right into it. We hit it so hard that it sounded like a gun going off. I was holding on tight to the door and seat, but I could hear the rest of my family being thrown around in the back. They were screaming and cursing. Eddie then managed to get control of the vehicle pretty fast. When it stopped, I jumped out to make sure my 2 brothers and my cousin were okay. They were only banged up a little bit, which is more than I can say for the pickup. The whole nose was totaled. The only thing still intact was one headlight, which was still lit up. As we're standing around the truck, we're all looking to the right of the road, where less than 6 feet away is this 6-foot high chain link fence that runs along the shoulder in both directions as far as the eye can see. The woods beyond the fence go all the way back into the hills. The point is that there is no way that whatever we hit took off in that direction, or even came at us from that way. Basically, it came out of nowhere, as if it loomed up from the surface of the road itself, or dropped down out of the sky. Meanwhile, Eddie was taking a closer look at the damage. It was, after all, his truck. He noticed that there was some skin, hair, and blood on what remained of the grill, along the lip of the hood, and even by the light fixture that was broken. Convinced that whatever it was hurt and possibly crumpled up nearby. We looked around up and down the road and off to the shoulder to the left, but we found nothing. As it was really dark and things were kinda eerie, we decided we would come back when the sun was up and look around. We all piled back in the truck, but Eddie couldn't get it to start. He would turn the key in the ignition and not even get a sound, as if there was no battery. The funny thing though is that one headlight was still on. Go figure. No sooner had Eddie finished cursing and punching the steering wheel when we hear off in the darkness and in the trees to the left some whistling and laughing, as if someone is playing games with us. 1 second it seems to be coming from over here, the next second from over there, and then after that from back a ways. It went on like this for like 10 minutes. My sister tells us that it's a skinwalker, and then she starts whispering Navajo prayers. By this time only my sister is still in the truck. Eddie and I are standing by the bed on the driver's side, and my other 2 brothers and cousin are in bed. My older brother Nicky is unafraid. He thinks that it's just some idiot in the woods, and volunteers to run to the house and come back with my father's car. The house is less than a mile away. No sooner does he start jogging off, we hear the same laughing and whistling go with him, as if he is being followed. He told us later that he was aware of it, and even though he thought he heard his name being whispered, he just kept jogging along all the same. About 10 minutes later, we see these headlights coming towards us. It was Nicky. When we all got back to the house, Eddie called the sheriff to report the accident. It was super late, but he told Eddie he would meet him there and have a look just in case somebody did get hit. I went back with Eddie in my dad's car. The sheriff showed up a few minutes later He had one of those industrial flashlights, but as much as he looked around, he couldn't find anything either. He agreed by the look of the hair left behind that whatever we hit, it wasn't a deer. When we told him about the whistling and laughing, his whole demeanor sort of changed. It was obvious that he was no longer interested in standing out there in the dark. He went back to his car and wrote out one of those little accident reports and gave it to Eddie. The next day, my mother had a friend of hers come to the Hogan. She was this really old woman that we were afraid of when we were kids. She had this small crystal, sort of pale yellow in color, that she held up and looked through, as if she could see into the past. She told my mother there was a fierce battle of wills between a local medicine man and a skinwalker last night, and that if it wasn't for the medicine man distracting the skinwalker, all 6 of us would have died when the truck went out of control and hit the trees. She never did tell us who that medicine man was or the skinwalker, though she did tell us that she knew them both. And interesting enough, when Eddie went back for the truck the next morning, it started right up without a problem. So if you're ever traveling through a Navajo REZ or Navajo Nation or around here at night, pray to whatever gods you have that your car does not stop and that you don't run into any dog, coyote, deer, or any animal. This encounter takes place in Chinle, Arizona, at our house. The 5 of us, a school friend, 2 cousins, my sister and I, were all in high school at the time. We were hanging out and everyone decided to spend the night because it was the middle of the summer and it was so hot. We set up our folks' van and my older brother's pickup truck so we could sleep outside where there was at least a bit of a breeze. We spent most of the earlier part of the night doing what teenagers do, including a little smoke, if you know what I mean, and also a couple of beers. Sometime after midnight, the 3 girls decided to call it a night and climbed into the bed of the pickup truck. My friend and I stayed out on the porch for another hour or so before heading to the van. We must have dozed off soon afterwards. According to my sister, she's a year younger than me. She is still awake, just lying there and looking up at the stars. The sky out here is really clear at night. There are stars everywhere. When out of nowhere, the neighbor's dogs from across the dry bed start to bark, which around here means that the local wildlife is out and about. My sister says she is listening between the sounds of the dogs to see if she can hear what's out there. Black against black, she suddenly sees this figure crouched on the roof of the pickup and staring down at her. She becomes absolutely frozen, partially out of fear and partially through no will of her own. She wants to scream or at least say something, but she can't find her voice. It's as if she's gasping for air, but without making any noise, and as if her lungs just won't fill. Just then, our younger cousin wakes up. She says because out of nowhere she gets this feeling of intense dread. She sits up kind of suddenly, and at the same time, it is like my sister is released from a spell. The air rushes into her lungs, and she lets out a scream, pointing to the top of the truck, but whatever it was is now gone. All 3 girls are now wide awake and panicking. They jump out of the back of the pickup and make for the house where my parents are sound asleep. My friend and I, totally oblivious to the excitement and somewhat under the influence, remain blissfully unconscious. Inside the house, my sister tells the other girls what she saw, or at least thinks she saw. At first they're all scared, but then they just start laughing. Then they become brave. My sister grabs a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and the three of them venture out into the dark yard. They come off the porch and paint the front of the property with the beam of the flashlight. They see nothing of interest. Now they head towards the back of the house, all together as if the light is some kind of shield. As the beam moves across the open yard, and then to the hill of the back of the property, they see this figure, moving quickly and steady, but in an awkward way, as if it has a new pair of shoes, making its way to the top. Before they can get a good look, it disappears over and down to the other side. My sister wants to go after it, but my two cousins pull her back towards the house. They go inside and wake up my parents. My mother refuses to leave the house, but my father, thinking that he's got some sort of thief running around his property, grabs his shotgun, 20 gauge, and makes for the hill. Of course, whoever or whatever it is no longer to be seen. He fires off 2 shots into the darkness anyway. Not that she needs to after those 2 shotgun blasts, but my sister then comes over to the van to wake us up to go inside the house. The only thing I'm asking is why the old man is blasting away into the night. She tells me her story. My friend, who definitely partied harder than I did, doesn't stir an inch. I told my sister I'm staying where I am, so the 3 girls decide they too are staying outside and set up watch. All 3 girls promise they won't fall asleep. Nevertheless, the 2 cousins are soon nodded out, and my sister is again alone with the stars. She says it's no more than 20 minutes, if even that many, when she hears what sounds like someone talking to themselves in Navajo. But it's old Navajo, and she doesn't know what's being said. The sound is coming from back by the hill. My sister wakes up the other 2 girls, and they run back up to the house. My sister makes her way back to my parents' room. My dad is out like a light and not responding. My mother, however, is talking in her sleep, as if she's admonishing someone. At the same time, she is invoking the name of Jesus. We are Christian after all. The next morning, my sister is asking her if she remembers any of it. My mother recalls having a dream in which something dark and menacing is outside the door trying to find its way in. She has no doubt it was evil, but she says that the prayer she did made it go away. Anyways, at the same time my mother is talking in her sleep, my sister feels a presence to the back door of the house of something she describes as evil. All 3 girls swear there's a heavy smell of something dead, which makes them nauseous. No sooner does my mother name Jesus, the feeling and the smell go away. When morning comes and the sun is up high and bright, the 3 girls and my mother go outside and have a look around. There, up on the hill, is a spot in the high grass that's all flat, as if something was sitting there. But there are no trails, tracks, or footprints of any kind. As they all come back to the house, my sister leaves the group and goes to the pickup where she left her sandals. She finds upon one of them a clump of long black hair, frizzy and tangled. All of the girls, including my mother, have dark hair, but none of them like that clump. She shows it to my mother, who tells her to immediately throw it into the fire of the stove. She tells her it is the mark of a Skinwalker, who intends to do bad medicine and must be destroyed. A woman living in White River, Arizona, comes home late at night from running an errand. She pulls up her driveway, gets out of the vehicle, and using her keychain, opens the garage door. Just as it's going up, she hears something run up at her back. As she turns, she sees this dark shadowy figure slip in behind her husband's truck, which is in the driveway, and to her left. The only thing that she sees is that it has patches of short, scraggly hair, and the feet that she saw don't look like they belong to anything that's human. She runs into the garage and into the house, screaming for her husband. He comes out the house and checks all around, but he finds nothing. He does tease her a bit and tells her that she shouldn't let her imagination get the better of her. However, only minutes later, a friend who the husband is expecting arrives. He's all excited and somewhat upset. He explains that as he was coming towards the house, some two-legged creature, he says it looked like a skinny bear, only really scraggly and skinny, with its mouth and teeth exposed, almost like it was drunk. It came stumbling out of the trees and straight into the side of his SUV. He slammed on his brakes, but when he got out to look, there was nothing on the road or off to the shoulder. The two then go out to have a look at the SUV, and sure enough, there's a small dent and some black hair stuck to the rear fender on the driver's side, and some hair in the bumper, but there's no blood. I recently moved to a house in Russia. I spent a few days in there, and I did not feel anything was wrong. One day, I decided to explore the snow-covered terrain, as staying in the cabin had become boring. I then noticed there were scratch marks on my door. They seemed very strong and prominent, yet I thought of it as some effect of the weather. There wasn't anything interesting, only the intriguing environment of the place itself. I soon discovered a pile of bones, scattered across the snow. I shook it off as a kill or a hunt of some sort. I kicked at the snow in hopes of finding a decent object that would be the highlight of my day. Along with the last pile of snow I launched, what seemed to be an old phone suddenly appeared and landed right onto the pile of snow. It seemed to be a very early phone. It was also heavily stained with red paint. I felt it would be wrong to switch on the phone, but I was too curious, and it was tough to resist the temptation. After I returned, I charged the phone, and sure enough, it opened up. It seemed to have been recently bought before it was lost or disposed of. All the applications were there, like the ones that you can't delete, but nothing else. I viewed the photo album and I saw a video, one that dated back to December 7th of 2011, but it was all black. The first 2 minutes were continuous crunching, so I assumed the person wasn't intentionally filming that. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like murmuring. I kept repeating that part and made out that the person was whispering some words, and then it was silence. I assumed the video was over. Upon leaving the video, I discovered it wasn't over. There were still at least 3 minutes remaining. It was silent for a minute before I heard a loud roar, and then there was a really loud strike. I could have sworn I heard a bone crack. It was followed by a loud crash. There was silence for a moment before I heard one of the most terrifying ends anyone could meet. I continued to listen as the roars began to fill my ears. Then, out of the blue, a series of blood-curdling screams drowned out the previous sounds. It continued on, and the screams became more desperate. getting loud. I could literally hear sounds of bones crunching. The screams were so loud at this point, and 2 audible cracks were the last thing I heard before the video went silent. I then knew that the scattered bones weren't from an animal in a kill, and that the phone wasn't disposed of, nor was the red paint on the phone actually paint. And most terrifying of all is that whatever the hell caused this, it knows I am here. This is my true Skinwalker story. At the time of this experience, I had no knowledge, nor had I ever heard about a Skinwalker. I was 19 years old, and I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, with my parents while attending community college. My sister-in-law had asked me to go with her to Tuba City, Arizona, to visit with her mother and pick up some papers. Her mother was a school teacher there on the Navajo REZ. We would be staying there overnight. Her mother lived in one of those small government houses on the REZ. There were about 3 or 4 houses near her on a small paved street, except for a few buildings near there. It was pretty isolated. My niece and nephew were with us, and we'll call my sister-in-law Mary, my nephew Mike, and my niece Amy. Mike was only 10 years old, and Amy was 9. It was early evening when we arrived in Tuba City. We had stopped at a fast food restaurant on the way to pick up dinner to go. After arriving at the house, we all laid together at a small kitchen table. We talked and visited a while before going into the small living room to watch TV. There wasn't a lot to do there, so Mary and I decided we would take a night drive and explore around the REZ. I know what you're thinking. It's a very bad idea, or a stupid idea. We drove around for about an hour and a half. Surprisingly, nothing weird happened. We were just laughing, talking, and listening to music as we drove up and down the dirt roads. After a while, we decided to head back. When arriving back home, we stayed up a little bit later, and then we decided it was time to go to bed. I slept in a small back bedroom on a twin bed next to a window with blinds. My nephew Mike slept on the floor in a sleeping bag in the same room. Mary and Amy were in the other room down the hallway. During the night, I was awakened by some strange, scratchy noises outside the window by my bed. It sounded like something was making long, slow clawing sounds down the window, like when someone runs their nails down a chalkboard. I am a light sleeper, so this of course woke me up. I whispered out loud to my nephew Mike to wake up, asking him if he was hearing the same thing I was. Mike was sleepy and groggy, being awakened from a deep slumber, so he seemed confused at first. I asked him again if he had heard the scratching noise, but he didn't answer. He was just out of it. He then laid back down and was out like a light. I was perplexed and a little scared. I thought to myself maybe it was just a stray cat or dog, but I couldn't figure it out. I did, however, have no indication to look out that window, so I just lay there listening. After a few minutes, the clawing stopped. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, it was morning. I mentioned this at the kitchen table during breakfast, but no one seemed very interested. We left later that afternoon, and I never even thought about it again. 6 months later, I was attending one of my college courses. The teacher was lecturing us about different legends and stories of the Navajo people. He touched on the stories of evil medicine men, or witches, that are called Skinwalkers. He began telling us that they are very dangerous and harmful. They have the ability to turn into or disguise themselves as any animal. They could take the form of a coyote, wolf, or even a bear. They also been known to follow people home at night. That's why you should never be out on the REZ after dark. You're never supposed to make eye contact with the Skinwalker. because they can actually possess your soul. You should never talk about them because you can draw them to you. They can cause issues and bring evil into your life. An icy chill went down my spine. I remember that night I had spent on the REZ. I wonder if a Skinwalker had followed Mary and me home that night after our drive. The realization that a Skinwalker had targeted us fills me with fear. I think of this often, and I'm so glad I didn't look out the window that night. I'm also haunted by the fact that there was just a very thin pane of glass separating me from such an evil thing. And now, I guess I know why no one in the family wanted to talk about it. The year was 2004 in South California. I was 16 years old, Native American, Navajo. My grandmother was a medicine woman at such a young age. She was in the process of teaching me her ways. When I was a child, she always told me not to be afraid of anything I might see, and that I was special. Ever since then, it was like a gate opened in me, and I began to see things and feel them sometimes, cries and screams like whispers in my ears. This causes me to have to wear earbuds to sleep, playing some music in order to drown out everything and just sleep. I've been through a lot of hauntings as I was a kid, until this day in 2021, but this haunting was one that has upset me, as something attacked my mother. One day, my mother came to me, and I could see she looked so drained, like she hadn't gotten good sleep in a long time. I asked her what was wrong. When I noticed that she didn't seem scared, she said to me, "I'm terrified to sleep. Every night, I awake, and I can't move at all. And then all of a sudden, I see something dark, slowly crawling from the edge of the bed by my feet, climbing up my legs all the way to me. All I can do was cry. I feel hands on my neck starting to choke me. I try to move to wake up your dad, but nothing happens. I kept my eyes on her, listening to her story to hear every word. I am no stranger to the supernatural, and I know ways to keep things away. This angered me, that something in my family's home was hurting my mother. I tried to calm her down and assure her she would be okay. "Mom, come sleep in my room tonight. I'll stay up and watch you as you sleep, and I'll see if I can catch it. I have a little dog named Princess. She was a very good dog. She would sleep with me in my room, and she would always growl when she felt danger, tangible or supernatural. Through the night, she would keep watching me all the time, and she made me feel safe. That night, my mother came into my room, laid on the bed, and I told her to sleep, reminding her that I would be here so that she doesn't have to worry about anything. It was around 10 p.m., and she finally fell fast asleep. I stayed up right next to her with my dog in the middle of us. The dog soon fell asleep too, and at around 2 a.m., nothing had yet happened. So I got up to use the bathroom. As I was coming out of the bathroom, I looked at my bedroom door, which I kept open just in case, and that's when a dark shape ran past inside. In my head, I thought, well, here we go. I walked back into my room and closed the door behind me. I laid on the bed and waited for anything to happen. Before long, I was getting bored since nothing was happening. I lay on my stomach with my hand holding my head. I let out a long breath. I folded my hands and I laid my head on them, facing away from the door. Not even 1 second passed and I heard my door open. I had a quick conversation in my head, and it was something like this. "Did something wake you up? Maybe my little brother. He must have woken up." As I was saying this in my head, I felt like someone was shaking the bed, but only by our heads. They were shaking it in a way as if they were testing to see if a person was awake. I said again in my head, "It must be my little brother. I better get up to see if he's okay." But when I tried to move, I couldn't at all. my head, my hands. I was completely frozen. The moment I noticed I couldn't move, I began to feel something climbing on the bed and on top of my mother. My heart began to pound, and I was thinking of what I could do. I felt something like a leg on the side of me from this thing that was on my mom. The bed felt like it was sinking in the middle, and whatever this was had its foot on my dog. My dog didn't even bother moving. It didn't make a noise this whole time. I thought in my head saying I had to do something. I need to think. At that moment, my side began to feel like it was on fire. It hurt so bad, making me lose focus on trying to think. But I pushed through. I ended up facing my fears and panics, and also became committed to prayer. But I couldn't believe it. I couldn't remember any prayers at the moment. I couldn't even make one up. I was blocked. So I looked at my hand that was close to my face, and I tried to focus on it, saying in my head, "Open your hands. Just open it." I tried and tried, but nothing was happening. I kept saying it over and over. It felt like hours now, but I needed to fight this and save my mom from this evil spirit. But then I felt the top of my fingers. I took that and began to try and open my hand fully and slowly. I could feel it moving as I felt my hand open just a bit. This thing jumped off my bed and ran out of the room. I heard my bedroom door slam shut, and I could finally fully move again. I looked at my mom, and she was okay with it. I let out a sigh of relief, and tears just started flowing again. My mom woke up asking what happened and why I was crying like that. So I told her, "Let's get the fuck out of here." So she and I went to the living room, and I told her everything that happened. After that, she looked so scared as I finished the story. We heard something that sounded like something running on hard wood. We looked up, and it was coming from the attic. But this time, it sounded like it was trying to get away. And then, it was gone. We didn't know what it was that was haunting my mom, but after that night, it never came back. And my mom thanked me for helping her. Amen.